Hello everyone. Hi. Welcome to the SALT+EARTH Festival. Thank you for joining us tonight. I'm Kate from the Kent Downs Area Outstanding Natural Beauty and the Cross-Channel Geopark. We hope that you can join us for more fun this weekend, for walks, talks, feasts, sea saunas, and enjoy the heritage beneath our feet and start to experience it with us. The Kent Downs Area of Outstanding Natural Beauty is a protected landscape that starts from the White Cliffs of Dover and goes up through, follows the chalk ridge up through the beautiful villages and the towns, Wye and Charing, and then all the way up to the London border and to Surrey Hills. And that chalk is the basis of so much of what is beautiful in the Kent Downs. So if you think about the places that you love and enjoy, the places that maybe you like walking your dog or taking your children, they're probably beautiful because of the geology and the soil and the rocks and everything that comes from what's beneath our feet. So the bluebell woods, obviously the chalk cliffs, the hops and the grape growing and the ragstone buildings. It's all down to the geology, to what's beneath our feet. So in celebration of that, we are working with our French counterparts that you can see on a clear day if you stand on the coast in Folkestone. The white cliffs and the rolling countryside of our French neighbouring landscape is very, very similar to Kent. And that's because we used to be connected, and we still are connected by the chalk under the channel. And the geology is very, very similar. So, in celebration of that, we've started our bid for UNESCO status for the Cross-Channel Geopark. UNESCO status isn't about recognising that the geology is incredible. That's undisputed. The UNESCO status is about people who live and work in the area and nationally sharing that appreciation and understanding and sharing the joy of the geology. So you're here at the start of our UNESCO journey, and your engagement and your participation in events all goes to support our UNESCO bid and will help us be successful when we submit the application. So thank you for supporting us. I'm going to show you a quick video which will show you a quick tour of the geopark and see if you can guess which images are from Kent and which images are from France. Thank you. the landscapes of Kent and northern France are very beautiful and very similar. So the UNESCO bid is all about recognising that and promoting that appreciation of the cross-border connection, regardless of country borders. To tell us a little bit more about the heritage beneath our feet and the stories of rocks, I'm absolutely delighted to welcome our keynote speaker for the SALT+EARTH Festival, Dr. Anjana Khatwa. Welcome to Kent, and thank you so much for joining us and for speaking to us today. Dr. Khatwa is an earth scientist, a presenter, an advocate for diversity in nature, and a lover of the stories of rocks. So please put your hands together for Dr. Anjana Khatwa.
Thank you very much. Thank you so much for having me here today, and it's extraordinary to think that I have travelled from the land of the Jurassic, which goes back almost 200 million years in time, to be with you here today in the land of the Cretaceous, which of course, hopefully, you know, is 145 to 65 million years. So I've actually jumped forward in time. So you look brilliant for your age, I have to say. I'm here today to really tell you and reveal the secret stories of these rocks that surround us. And I call them the whispers of rock. And I'm in the process, very exciting process, of writing a proposal for a book, which will hopefully be published in, hopefully, 2 years' time if I can type fast enough. In 2025, there will be a book that really does help you to get deep under the skin of what rocks are, how they connect us to the world that we live in, but crucially, how they connect us to each other. And, you know, I'm so privileged to be here today to be able to tell you that as an earth scientist, because you are lucky enough to live on rocks that connect you to continental Europe. And that is a remarkable gift that you have in this county on this area of outstanding natural beauty. And to be honest, I'm quite envious we don't have that in Dorset. We do have ammonites and lots of other fossils, but we don't have that connection that you have to Europe, that you have so visibly, so tangibly here in this county. So this is something to celebrate. I wasn't always a fan of rocks. I was a fan of science growing up, very young. I was an 8-year-old and I wanted to, actually, ironically, I wanted to be an astronaut, and I wanted to actually study space and astronomy, and something happened to me that changed that path. Now, I didn't grow up in a beautiful coastal town like Folkestone. I grew up in a beautiful urban town like Slough. I don't know if you think that's beautiful. Beauty is in the eye of the beholder, and we had a big discussion today about areas of outstanding natural beauty and what beauty is. And I grew up in Slough, and this is my family here. This is my dad, this is my mum, my sister, my brother just there. And that's me in my Sunday best. And this picture encapsulates very much who I am. I am, this is my dad and my mum, but my dad and my mum are from Kenya, and generations before that, my family come from Rajasthan in India. And when my parents came to England in the late 1960s, they came to Slough and they lived in Slough. But they never forgot their roots in Kenya, and their family was still there. A lot of my family still are there. And we would go back there to visit this family, go on holiday. My parents would take us out to go and see these places that they loved about nature, Mombasa in particular. And there was one trip that we went, and we stopped at this place. This is a Shetani lava flow in the Tsavo West National Park, which is in between Nairobi and Mombasa. And if you think back to your own experiences about why you love nature, sometimes there's one moment in your life where you think, I went on that walk with my grandfather, or my mother took me to this meadow or this park, or I did this at school, and it was that turning point for you. And then that moment stays with you for your whole life, and you become a bird watcher or a lover of bees, or you know wildflowers when you see them. For me, that happened, and that moment was with a rock. And This area here, this is a very important area, geologically speaking. It's part of the East African Rift Valley. A rift valley is a system where the crust is literally being pulled apart and lava comes up through fissures and spreads out over the Earth's crust. As the lava cools, it forms into a solid rock. Usually that's basalt over time, which forms a giant's causeway. Here in Kenya, it forms this really rugged, jagged lava rock. And you can see it in my hand here. And I was 13 years old, and I was dressed in my Sunday best because, this is what young geologists wear on field work, rubber plimsolls. And I walked across this lava field, this ancient lava field. And in that moment, I knew something inside my brain switched. I'd already loved science. I knew that's what I wanted to do. But in this moment, I felt the rocks kind of whisper to me, we used to be deep under your feet. We were swirling as a hot, molten mass of minerals deep beneath your feet. And then one day, this crust ruptured, and we were forced out. We were forced out into this foreign, cold environment. It was so cold that we began to cool. And as we cooled, we formed this dark, jagged rock that you can feel through your plimsolls, Anjana. We're going to poke you. We're going to wake you up to our story. And that's what I felt. And I remember that day like it was yesterday. I kind of, your parents are like, we need to go, come back to the van. We need to get to Mombasa. And so in a hurry, I'm hearing these whispers of the rock in my mind. I'm a 13-year-old. And I pick up 2 chunks of rock. And I was 13 years old. I still have them today. That's the rock. And when I hold this rock, I can feel its story because every rock has a story. And I'm going to talk about this a bit later, but this rock has a story. And this is a rock that I picked up today at Samphire Ho. Lisa, who was, taking me back to Folkestone, was very, very kind to stop at the red light and say, Anjana, you can get that rock. I was like, really? Really? Can I just open the door and get that rock? And she said, yeah, go ahead. And I was like, thank you, Lisa. You kind of know the person that I am. And this is the rock that I wanted to bring and show you today. And it's chalk. So rocks are full of these amazing stories, but, they quite often don't speak to us unless we can decode what they're trying to tell us. And I am incredibly fortunate. I'm one of those privileged people that is able to go to the beach and to look at a cliff face, and literally it's a bit like a Harry Potter movie. The rocks just reveal their story to me. I can look at the chalk and I can see back in time, 145 million years, I can see what that environment was like. It is a remarkable gift that you earn over years, if not decades of study and research. But that's me right now here. You can be 10 years old and pick up a book at your local library and flick through and look at fossils or look at different rocks. And that's where your journey starts. What do I do now? So I've had 15 years on another UNESCO site, helping people of all ages learn about rocks and fossils. So I had 15 years at the Jurassic Coast World Heritage Site. So I'm coming to you at a very exciting point in your own journey of celebrating the rocks where you live. And I'm so privileged to be here, to be part of that spark. Hopefully you'll leave here at the end of this 45 minutes with that understanding and that love for rocks in the way that I love rocks. I do this, I spread my love and joy for rocks through different ways. In fact, during lockdown, I created a YouTube series called Where on Earth Do You Live? Which I have tried to pitch to TV channels multiple times and it's not kind of gone anywhere. Because I always get the response of, people are going to find that really boring. So, BBC and Channel 4 and Channel 5 and all of those production companies keep telling me it's too dull, no one's going to watch it. So in the end, what I did during lockdown was I created a YouTube series. And actually one of the shows that I did was about Folkestone. The irony. So when someone said, that's Folkestone Warren over there, I was like, yes, I did a film about that. I went away and I researched Folkestone. I didn't know I was going to be here, like a year and a half later, but here I am. These are the kind of programs that I do, and I think part of the problem we have as earth scientists, as geologists, is that people do look at our subject through a lens which is very much shrouded in misunderstanding, misconceptions, mystery, even fear, actually. And what I do is I try to go onto programs made for the mainstream, so like ITV. I've done a lot of work with ITV on programs like This Morning and Love Your Weekend, and my job is to really decode the complexity of the stories of these rocks for a very broad audience. And that's what I'm really passionate about. I'm really passionate about that, and I've been doing that for over 15 years. And what I found is that it's a really hard sell. You know, even 3 weeks ago, I was sitting in a production meeting with a production company. I say, look, I'm writing this book proposal, and it will be published. It's going to be a really, really powerful book that reveals these amazing stories. And the two producers were looking at me across the table saying, yeah, we're still not buying it. And, you're like saying, it's amazing. The rocks have these incredible stories, and there's this leads to this, leads to this. And it is a really hard sell. So I'm not going to lie. I want to thank you for giving up your Friday night of not watching some Netflix show that you're binging on, to give it up, to listen to me drone on about inanimate objects full of minerals. So thank you very much for that. What do we do when we're confronted by such a huge obstacle of how to win your hearts and your minds about these objects, about these inanimate objects that are full of minerals? How do I do that? It is a gift that I've taught myself, a skill that I've taught myself over the last 20 years. And the key thing is wherever you are in the world, wherever you are, a rock will connect you. A rock connects you to your sense of place. It connects you to your sense of being. It connects you to the person across the room. It connects you to the person in another continent. The rocks are ubiquitous. And I think this is a really key part of how we begin to deconstruct what rocks mean to us in our society. We live on a planet that's 4.5 billion years old, and there are a multitude of stories that we can tell about the planet. And I'm going to try and we haven't got 4 billion years or so for me to go over every single minutiae detail. But what I want to do is present to you a series of stories about rocks through different lenses. And I'm going to use the natural elements to tell those stories for you. But over 4.5 billion years, this is a massive number. It's almost incomprehensible. People use all sorts of analogues to talk about geological time. It's like if there was a clock, mankind would have existed in the last millisecond. It's that type of timescale that I'm asking you to stretch your brains to. There are so many zeros there. It's difficult for your brains to stretch like that. But we're talking about a planet that has evolved from gas, dust, coming together, coalescing, and forming a ball of molten minerals, and those molten minerals cooling on the crust and then forming the Earth that we have today. Time is a really significant factor in geology. It's the underlying principle that helps us understand everything about who we are today. This is what the Earth looked like in the beginning. It's this molten mass of magma, and it's being bombarded with meteorites. Asteroids are foreign bodies in space, and they become meteorites when they actually enter the Earth's atmosphere. But this is what it was like. This is the Earth 4.5 billion years ago. And that's the scientist view of that's how the world forms, through a scientific lens. But what I find remarkable is that there are civilizations and cultures all over the world. For thousands of years, they have speculated and talked about and sung and drawn where the world has come from, the origins of the Earth. And this is what I find remarkable, is that a continuous narrative through all cultures, separated by continents, so separated by geography, and even separated by time, had the same idea. That Mother Earth, this nurturing, let me go back, I'm mixing up my buttons here. That Mother Earth is a unifying principle across Greek culture, Hindu culture, Incan and Native American culture, Mother Earth is a unifying principle that tells us about how this planet formed. There are some really wonderful stories in here that you can research, that you can read about. Sky Mother Haudenosaunee people have theorized that she was a woman who lived in the celestial beings, and when she fell from the sky, the creatures of the earth tried to save her as she fell towards the sea, as she fell towards the water. And desperately, they tried to find something for her to land on. And in the end, they found a turtle. And Sky Mother fell from the heavens, and she landed on a turtle, and that became the earth. And she would then have two children that then became other deities. But that initial moment of falling from the sky onto the earth, that was the start of that legend of the creation of the planet. In Incan culture, Pachamama is the goddess of the mountain. And this is a really interesting picture because these are Incan people and they are laying offerings into the ground, into a pit in the earth. Now, what they believe is that Mother Earth, Pachamama, she's the goddess of earthquakes, she's the goddess of the mountain. So when they feel those earthquakes in their landscape, they are saying that Pachamama is displeased with them. And that what they do is they put offerings into the ground to appease her anger. That she feels neglected, she feels left out of the people's lives. And so these are the offerings that they give her. Now, Boom Devi is an interesting one because I am a Hindu. And I grew up very much in that culture of worshipping Mother Earth. Mother Earth is central to who we are as Hindus and in Indian culture. And a few weeks ago, well, actually, last month I was on a walk with a group of people in the Chilterns area of outstanding natural beauty, and these are a group of South Asian people of different faiths and different backgrounds, and they had asked me to come along and talk about a rock, and I thought, yeah, that's fine. Of course, I travelled from Dorset to Slough, and then completely forgot that I had to bring a rock, so I asked my mother, I said, Mother, do you have a rock that I can borrow for this talk that I've got to give in the Chilterns? And I don't know about your mothers, but my mother said, yeah, sure, I've got a rock. You can go and have a look at my rocks. I was like, wow, my mother has a rock collection. I think I've died and gone to heaven. And she said, yes, here, have this rock. And it was this piece of very coarse-grained pink granite. So through my geological eyes, that's what I saw. And of course, as a geologist, the first question we ask is, where is this rock from, Mother? And she said, Wales. I was like, great, that's great, and as a geologist what we're looking for is very specific detail about the location of the rock, which then tells us the provenance, essentially. It helps me understand the story of the evolution of the rock. And so I asked her again, Wales, great, Mum, that helps me to narrow it down, but I've got to really talk about this rock. So whereabouts in Wales? She said, I don't know, somewhere in Wales, somewhere. I was like, okay, all right. So I'm looking at the rock and I'm thinking, okay, so it's a pink granite. I can kind of, wing it by telling the story. And then she said, have you seen my other rock? I was like, oh my God, this is not the only rock that my mum has. Oh, my heart is breaking here. And so she said, now I've got this other rock in the temple. So as Hindus, we don't necessarily need to go to a mandir, a temple, to worship. Hindus have temples at homes in the cleanest part of the house, which is usually above the washing machine, high up so it doesn't shake around. And my mother showed me this rock that she had, and it was amazing. And she said, well, it's up there, in the temple. You can bring it down if you want. You can have a look at it. And I was like, okay, that's great. She goes, I can't do that because I can't touch it because I've not had a shower this morning, but you can because you already have. So for my mother, that rock was sacred. And as I took it down, it was a really interesting rock, actually. And through that scientific lens, it was a piece of basalt. And it had a very it was very angular. It obviously fell off a fresh rock face. And I said, Mum, where did you get this rock? This is amazing. It's beautiful. And she said, oh, Wales. I was like, okay. So my mum's rock collection is basically all from Wales. And I said, well, why did you choose it? She goes, oh, it's because it's got this conical shape. It's shaped like a mountain. And I said, oh, okay. And she said, it's to represent, Parvati, the goddess of the mountain. And Parvati is the wife of Lord Shiva. And if you know anything about Hindu culture or religion, Lord Shiva is the creator and the destroyer of worlds. And there is so much significance in this moment because here is a rock brought from Wales. It has the sacred mark on it, a red sacred mark, which my mother puts on the rock to worship it, to recognize the spiritual entity that the rock represents as Mother Earth. And because it's Parvati, it's the goddess of the mountain, who is the consort of Lord Shiva. Shiva is the destroyer and the creator. And as a scientist, I exist in a world of creation and destruction. Every part of my world, my geological world, is surrounded by stories of rocks being created and rocks being destroyed. And this is why, going back to ancient stories of how people view the origins of the earth, the formation of the earth, the stories that these supposedly inanimate objects tell us, we begin to look at these rocks through a different lens. And there's an amazing author, Robin Wall Kimmerer. If you haven't read her book, Braiding Sweetgrass, it is a book that would change your life about the way you view the natural world. Because just like Robin Wall Kimmerer, I have been taught my whole life to look at the natural world, and especially rocks, through a lens that tells me that these supposedly inanimate objects are imbued with spirit and life and stories. And that is why that moment was so powerful, to revisit that, for my mother to remind me, to connect me back as a scientist with what this object means. As a scientist, we're always looking for evidence to tell us about where these rocks have come from. And this is a picture of zircon. And this particular crystal has been dated to 3 billion years old. How do you do that? How do you even conceptualize time in this tiny fragment of, you need an electron scanning microscope to look at it. It's smaller than the width of a human hair. When the Earth was this magmatic ball, this ball of hot minerals, these crystals were forming, and as the crust, as the upper layer of this magma cooled and formed the crust, these tiny little crystals would migrate and be present in those rocks of the crust. And then hundreds, if not billions of years later, these crystals survive the process of destruction. So there are some researchers who went to Australia. This paper was published about 10 years ago, and they found zircon crystals dating back to almost 4.4 billion years. And these tiny specks of time reveal to us, reveal to the scientists, the origins of our Earth, that story of our Earth. And I find that extraordinary. In Britain, in the United Kingdom, if you are lucky enough to go to northern Scotland, the Isle of Lewis, for example, you'll have the opportunity to meet some of the oldest rocks on Earth. This is called the Lewisian gneiss. Sorry, I'm going to keep pressing the wrong button all the time. This rock is known as the Lewisian gneiss, and that's how it's spelled. I'm saying nice, but actually it's gneiss, nice. There. This is a rock that is a metamorphic rock. Now, it forms from a granite that was present at the birth of the Earth. But what's happened is that at some point, about 400 million years ago, that granite has been subject to intense heat and pressure. It's been squeezed, it's been stretched. You can see it, can't you? It looks like you can see these beautiful folds, and that's because the rock has literally been stretched and squeezed and pulled apart around about 300 million years ago, when Scotland was subject to enormous tectonic activity. But there are zircon crystals inside this rock that tell us how old it is. And I find it rather beautiful. I find that sense of beauty in the age of the rock, but also in those structures. You can put your hand on the rock and actually feel the motion of the earth stretching and moving that rock around. I'm not the only person to have looked at rocks like that and felt that sense of emotion and connection. About 3,000 years ago, an ancient person also felt that way about that rock, and they picked up a pebble of the Louisian gneiss, and they carved it and they fashioned it into something new. And this is an ancient mace head. This is, okay, I'm not so hot on archaeology, so if you're an archaeologist here, please don't crucify me. This is a Neolithic mace head, and I saw this at the World of Stonehenge exhibition at the British Museum. And I lost my mind over this. I really did. I mean, I really lost my mind over the rocks at this exhibition. I don't know if any of you went, but I kind of lost interest when I got into the gold and the other bits, the shiny bits. But it was in the Neolithic section that I had a good time. When I saw this, the whole kind of world, the noise of the people around me just slipped away, because this rock represents a palimpsest of stories. What do I mean by that? Palimpsest is another word that describes layers of storytelling. So an ancient person 3,000 years ago picked up a pebble of Louisian gneiss and put their own imprint on it. 3,000 years old, this object. But that story is already imprinted on another story. The Louisian gneiss is 3.5 billion years old. Did that person know what they were doing? Did they know that they were holding one of the oldest rocks on Earth? I don't know. They didn't have the science behind them. They must have felt something because they felt it was worthy enough to be shaped and carved and traded. So this mace head wasn't found on the Isle of Lewis or anywhere in Scotland. It was found in a riverbed in a burial mound near Stonehenge. So it was traded, it was passed down, it was valued, and it ended up in a sacred burial mound on Salisbury Plain. Isn't that extraordinary? What do we do today to show value and to show care and appreciation for objects today? I mean, it's extraordinary that object travelled and was looked after and loved and cared for. That just blows my mind. Fire is a great lens to look at rocks on Earth. Many years ago, I was very lucky enough to go to Hawaii, and this is Kilauea, and this is what it looks at night time. You can see the glow coming from the heart of the Earth. And as most people do when they go to Hawaii, you take a helicopter trip and you fly over the volcanoes. And I love this because you're literally looking through into a lava tube. So as the lava is flowing out of the volcano, the crust, the top part of the lava, cools very, very quickly because it's meeting the cold air. But underneath, where the lava is insulated and the heat can build up, it flows very freely. But you get these wonderful openings here where you can literally look into the center of the Earth. What's also wonderful is that this lava has a specific type of mineral content. It's quite low in silica, which means that it flows a bit like if you have syrup on your porridge in the morning or anything kind of thick and gloopy like that. This is what the lava is like. So it's very, very kind of runny, but it kind of forms these interesting structures like this, this particular lava is called pahoehoe, which in Hawaiian means ropey lava. And I love that. I know, ropey lava, right? And if you haven't, if you're like me and you follow volcano YouTube, you can see amazing pictures like this in Iceland. And this is a fissure in Iceland that has erupted over the last 6 weeks. And there have been brilliant videos of drones kind of literally flying into the heart of the volcanic eruptions. But it tells us about the dynamic nature of the Earth. And what I love is I've got a couple of these kind of rocks at home, recent volcanic rocks, and you can hold a piece of rock like this in your hand. You say, okay, this is like 120. I can't remember what the age of the rocks is, but this is Cretaceous, so it's anywhere between 140 to 65 million years old. And you can no one has actually sent me a piece of this Icelandic lava rock yet, or I'm kind of begging on Twitter. So if anybody knows anybody who knows anybody, I'd like one, please. If you hold a rock from this eruption, it's literally like 2 weeks old. Isn't that amazing? You can hold a rock that was formed 2 weeks ago, fresh, like literally box fresh, to something that's like hundreds of millions of years old. And that just blows my mind. I think that's just amazing. Sometimes you get situations when, so we've seen in the other film where the molten rock, where the magma is being forced up through a fissure in the Earth's crust and it pours out over the top and that forms lava. Lava is when magma basically reaches the Earth's crust and comes out. Okay, that's lava. However, sometimes you have situations where magma cannot breach the Earth's crust. Unfortunately, it kind of gets stuck where it is. It rises up from the mantle. It intrudes into the Earth's crust. But something happens. Something blocks its way. What happens is that the magma, so I'm going to put an image in your mind of a lava lamp. So think of a lava lamp with those globules of wax rising up in that heated glass. When those globules of magma rise up, they get trapped. They can't go anywhere. So what happens is that they're kind of stuck where they are. And what happens is they begin to cool down. And I spend a lot of time in Cornwall because I'm from the southwest. And I've done a couple of TV shows in Cornwall talking about this a lot. Cornwall seems to be the flavour of last year's TV shows. I think that's something to do with lockdown, or I don't know, people want to see Cornish landscapes. When that magma gets trapped, as it cools, the minerals inside have a chance to grow. And it's a bit like flowers blooming in your garden during the summer, except that these flowers, these minerals, take millions of years to grow. So this particular granite on this side, you can see feldspar, mica, biotite, quartz, all sorts of minerals in there. The minerals that you see take about 2 million years to form. That's how long it takes for a huge intrusion of granite into the Earth's crust to cool down. And I kind of did a bit of maths when I was thinking about this. I was thinking, how 2 million years, what does that mean exactly? How do people understand that? Well, I kind of timed, and I actually did this, by the way. I timed how long it took for a kettle to boil water. Because I'm like sitting there thinking, oh my God, it's taking ages. It's like, like 3 minutes or whatever it is. My kettle's from Lidl though, so hey. It took about 3 or 4 minutes to boil a kettle, and I worked out that for that magmatic intrusion, which we call a batholith, for the granite to form, I would need to literally press that button on the kettle. I would need to press that 2 billion times to be the equivalent of the time it took for that granite to form, for those minerals to grow, for that molten mass of magma to cool down so I could touch it. 2 billion years. When granite erodes, because rocks don't last forever, we talked about creation and destruction as balancing forces in nature. That comes back to Lord Shiva. Creation and destruction are absolutely essential. If I remind you, and I don't want you to groan, but of the rock cycle, remember sedimentary, metamorphic, igneous rocks? They're all connected because rocks are created and destroyed. When granite weathers, the minerals change, they're released, and they form something completely different. Now, the question here is, how is that teapot, which I nicked off the Met Museum, this is a teapot from Jingdezhen in China, and it dates back to the 18th century. What is the connection between a teapot and this piece of granite? I'm not going to do like a, kind of pop quiz. I'm going to tell you the answer so you can go home and tell your friends. Granite, when it erodes, it forms clay minerals. And this province of Jingdezhen in China, about 350 million years ago, there were huge magmatic intrusions that kind of forced their way into the crust of the land that would later become China. And the climatic environment basically broke the granite down, and it formed a special type of clay mineral. And that clay mineral was called kaolinite. And it was called kaolinite because it was named after this massive, great big hill of clay, and the hill was called Kaoling. Now, the people who lived in Jingdezhen saw they saw this clay and thought, this is amazing. What can we do with this? I know, we'll make ceramics. And so, from the 8th to the 17th century, 18th century, basically Jingdezhen became the porcelain capital of the world. You know, they were like churning out ceramics like Amazon delivers parcels. It was like the massive production hub of global ceramics. One of the things that they made was the teapot. And if you had a cup of tea today, you have granite to thank for that, because as the Chinese were exporting all of these beautiful porcelain ceramics across the world, the teapot was one of its exports. And as the teapot made its way across Europe to France, to Belgium, to the Netherlands, it made its way over to Britain, suddenly people were like, what is this you're saying? It's like this teapot. And you basically, okay, tea. And so tea became a major fashion trend in Britain in the 18th century, because it arrived because of the teapots being made in Jingdezhen, and that only happened because the granite that was intruded into that land eroded and weathered into this amazing clay mineral called kaolinite. So because you have a cup of tea today, make sure you thank granite in the morning. This is Shetland, which is a geopark. And it's an incredibly important place for its geology. The story here is slightly different to China. Here, the granite, you can see it poking out of the soil, and that tells you that it's really, really thin soils. The soils here are super acidic. They are really poor in nutrients. And many, many years ago, I organised a World Heritage Youth Summit on the Jurassic Coast, and we invited young people from all over the country, and Bermuda as well, because Lyme Regis had a link to Bermuda. We invited young people from all over the country to represent their World Heritage sites at this youth summit. And we had young people come all the way from St Kilda in the Orkneys, where granite is one of the major rock sequences there. The first thing they said was, oh my God, this is so amazing, there's trees. And I was like, really? Oh, they've not seen trees. And they were like, absolutely. They were saying it's so exposed up there that trees cannot grow. And the reason for that is the soils. Going back to destruction and creation, the granite, as it weathers, it forms incredibly poor soils here. And when we look at the impact that granite has on the culture and traditions, here is the connection. The only sheep that the crofters could find that were able to survive on these really poor soils, which, poor vegetation, was remarkably a breed of sheep called the Shetland sheep. It literally is called the Shetland sheep. So this breed of sheep had a particular type of wool that was really great for a certain type of knitting, and this was Fair Isle. And Fair Isle knitting comes from the Nordic countries. So the proximity of the Shetland Isles to Norway and Sweden and Finland and Iceland, that culture came down. It kind of mixed with the Shetlanders, but they found that this wool was perfect to create this particular type of knitting pattern, which then, just like some other fashion trends we know of, it became super trendy because I think it was which prince was it? I can't remember. I'm going to have to go back and check. Prince Charlie, possibly, but there was a portrait painted of a royal family member wearing like a Fair Isle jumper, and everybody went nuts. They were like, I want that jumper. I want that Fair Isle jumper. And basically that exploded the Fair Isle knitting industry in the Shetlands. So if you're wearing a Fair Isle jumper this winter, you have granite to thank for that. So I'm just going to put that out there, because I wear a lot of Fair Isle. Ice is also another great lens for which to understand the impact of geology on our lives. And this is a beautiful picture from Jökulsárlón in Iceland. I've had the great privilege of having lots of field work out there. It is an utterly beautiful place. And these really interesting kind of black marks along here are moraines. What happens here is the ice is an incredibly powerful agent of erosion. As the ice meets the rock, something really interesting happens. If you've done physics, when you'll know the word friction. And friction is when two bodies meet together, they rub against each other, they release energy, and that energy is heat in this situation, which then melts the ice. The ice becomes water, and it seeps into the cracks of the rocks. Now, in the daytime, that's great because the water is water, because the temperatures are warmer. At night time, the temperatures fall, the water freezes, water expands when it freezes, and if it's in the joints of the rock, it widens the cracks in the rocks, which causes the rocks to fall off eventually onto the surface of the ice, and what they form are these beautiful trails of rock, essentially, like a conveyor belt of rock. So imagine you're in the supermarket and, oh my God, shopping. That's what the glacier is doing. It's a conveyor belt of geological material which is feeding into this lake here. They are brilliant agents of erosion. Ice is also effective at carrying massive blocks of rocks like this, and we call them glacial erratics, and you can see them all over northern Britain. In fact, if you're going up to Birmingham anytime soon, you can Google Birmingham Erratic Trail, because in the neighbourhoods around Birmingham, there are glacial erratics all over the place. They are there for you to go and see and for you to touch, and you'll be able to feel their enormous story of migration. Now, this particular erratic, this is from New York State, and it has a really interesting story that I'm discovering as I'm doing the research for my book. This is a piece of, I think it's red quartzite, possibly red granite, I can't remember, but it's sitting on top of limestone pillars. And to my geological eyes, this is 100% a natural feature. The reason why I know this is because I've looked at the evidence, geological evidence of New York State. I can see these really weird-shaped egg features called drumlins, which is where the ice has flown over the landscape and shaped glacial sediments around kind of hills or rocks that are poking out. But there are also lots of other glacial erratics in the state itself that give me that evidence that glaciers were there and formed this feature. But not everybody thinks this. And I went back to some historical records, and there's a geologist called John Finch, and in 1850 he writes that this glacial erratic is not of natural origin. His proposal is still living today, to my dismay, actually. This is the interpretation panel at the balanced rock. So it's called balanced rock, that erratic. I'm going to read this out to you because you may not be able to read it. This balanced rock is estimated to weigh 60 tons. Geologists refer to it as an quote and unquote erratic, which I think is interesting. This boulder is composed of a type of granite, so it's a red granite, that does not match the rock normally found in the vicinity and is thought to have been deposited during the glacial period. Right, great. So they've kind of put that theory of science there. This is what interests me. It's been suggested in recent years, recent meaning 1850, that this may be a dolmen, a Celtic ceremonial stone used to memorialise the dead. Right, interesting, huh? So, this guy, John Finch, this geologist, he's actually a Scottish geologist who then went to the US. What he says in his notes is that this glacial feature, I'm going to go back so you can look at it, he's basically writing that this glacial feature is a magnificent cromlech. Those are his words, magnificent cromlech. And the word he's using, cromlech, is a Welsh word to describe these megalithic structures that you can see dotted all over, northern Europe. So why is John Finch ascribing a Celtic origin to a natural feature? So, in the 17th and the 18th centuries, if you don't know about American history, the potted history is essentially European settlers came over to North America, they discovered indigenous people, the First Nations people, the Native Americans, and they began to claim their land. And thus you have the situation in the states that you have today. By claiming that this feature, balanced rock, by claiming that this feature, balanced rock, has Celtic origin, effectively what he's saying is that we were here first. We were here. We belong here. This feature justifies our presence because you can see this feature in Europe. So here's the evidence. So you're kind of like ignoring all the geological evidence, like, sod that. What we're really going to focus on is the fact that this looks the same as this. And when we think about this abuse of science and of geology and of landscape interpretation, it becomes very dangerous, because what we're doing is we're denying, the existence and the presence of Native American people, their indigenous culture. We're almost taking their land away from them by saying we were here first because, here's the evidence, when in fact it's not really evidence. And we're also denying their intellectual ability to create structures like this. So he didn't say, it could have possibly been down to Native American people creating this amazing rock structure. He's saying it's Celtic. So there's a supremacist thinking in using the geology to justify colonialism as well. Really interesting to unpick those stories. Geology, rocks, naturally they record processes of life as well, the evolution of life. And this is this beautiful beach. This is not the Jurassic Coast, but it is the same rocks that we see on the Jurassic Coast. This is like the Lias sequences. They date back 200 million years, when this part of the world was covered in a deep ocean full of sea creatures of the likes we don't see today. You can just see this ammonite here in the limestone ledges. This is Kilver Beach in Somerset. And I was very lucky. It's an AONB. It's on the Quantox AONB. Very lucky to go there for my birthday, actually. Isn't that great? This is what I drag my family out to. It's my birthday. Let's go look at fossils and rocks. They're used to it. There are all sorts of interesting rocks that record life on Earth, and I think this is perhaps the most interesting and controversial rock. This rock is formed from plant material, organic material, that lived like 500 million years ago. There were vast forests covering the Earth. So these particular fossil ferns date back to 358 million years ago. They're carboniferous. And just like most plant matter today, if you take a walk through a wood now, it's autumn, the leaves are falling off the trees, you're going to crunch them using your feet, they're going to break down, they're going to go into the soil, and they'll become kind of like decaying organic matter. This is what was happening on Earth all that time ago during the Carboniferous period. What happens once that organic matter begins to break down is that it forms a rock. So you've got this organic matter here, it's falling to the bottom of a swamp or the forest floor or wherever it might be, a lake. As that organic matter is compressed, it's gently cooked, so it's put under a lot of heat and pressure, and it forms a new rock called coal. And I said controversial because obviously we're living in a time of a climate crisis, a climate emergency, and the reason why we are facing this issue of rising carbon dioxide levels in our atmosphere is because we are releasing hundreds of millions of years worth of carbon into the atmosphere at a rate that has never been seen, because for millions of years that carbon has been locked inside this rock, and by burning it like that, it's back in the atmosphere. So it's like almost like, here's a dam, here's the floodgate, I'm just going to open it up and let everything just come out. That is what we are doing every time we burn coal. We're releasing all of that locked up carbon that came from those plants into our atmosphere all over again. Interesting, huh? Rocks are to blame. This is where I'm from. This is, well, not from, but, this is where I live now. I'm very lucky to live here. A UNESCO World Heritage Site. So hopefully in a few years you'll be able to join this UNESCO family of global geoparks. But this is an extraordinary place. It's a World Heritage Site because it records 185 million years of geological time. You can't see a continuous sequence of rocks that records that time period anywhere in the world. You can only see that here in Dorset and Devon. And the reason is you can go from Triassic rocks, which were formed in ancient deserts. That's Sidmouth, places like that. If you go to Lyme Regis and Charmouth, the rocks there are 200 million years old. They formed in very deep seas. And then if you go out towards Swanage and Studland Bay, you have the chalk, which is Cretaceous, which is much younger. And it's due to tectonic activity during the formation of the Alps that all of those rocks that formed in horizontal layers were tipped towards the east. They were tilted towards the east, then eroded, and then eventually they would form the coastline. That's why we get that beautiful story of rocks changing through time. That's why it's a World Heritage Site. So it's a very, very special place. If you are lucky enough to go out there, and who wants to go? Because you've got Folkestone Warren, right? You've got your own fossils here. But if you have a chance to go, you may find evidence of life like this. These are my two best fossils. This is an ichthyosaur vertebrate that I found last October, and it was my first one after like 15 years of looking, so I'm really embarrassed to tell you that. Don't tell anyone though, secret. This is the jawbone of an ichthyosaur. So these amazing creatures were living 200 million years ago in these Jurassic seas, and as they died, their bodies fell to the bottom of the ocean floor, sunk to the bottom of the ocean floor. The soft body parts decayed. Their skeletons would be buried under layers and layers of rock, eventually turning into fossils. And as this, one of the largest coastal landslides in Europe, this is Black Ven, as it erodes, as it's basically the toe of the landslide is eaten away by the sea, those fossils are washed out onto the beaches for you to find. It is a really magical place. It is a magical activity to do. I love it. Obviously, these aren't my fossils. Otherwise, I'd be very happy. These are all fossils held in museums, but this is the evidence of life that we see of this period. Ammonites. These are pliosaur teeth. The pliosaur was one of the biggest Jurassic predators. And then we have the ichthyosaur there and the strange bullet-shaped fossils called belemnites. So there's a really rich diversity of life shown in these rocks, particularly on the Jurassic coast. That's why it's a World Heritage Site. Another element that I want to interpret rock through is air. And when we talk about air, you think, well, what on earth is she talking about? What is she talking about? This is a place where I had the privilege of spending many years. This is southwestern Utah. And I was very lucky to work with the National Park Service in the Southwest Division in Arizona and Utah for a number of years as a geoscientist in the park. And so I spent many happy months crawling through deserts and looking at rocks there. This is known as the Navajo sandstone. And what is really beautiful about this is, yes, the features are absolutely incredible. These are natural arches. They are formed by aeolian erosion. This is erosion by the wind. So the wind literally picks up particles, grains of sand, picks them up, and as it picks up the grains of sand, it rubs them across the rock like a sandpaper. And this happens for thousands of years. And as that happens, it carves out these beautiful features. The whole of Arches National Park is just an incredible place to see. You see these beautiful features. But that's not the whole story. Then when you think about it, and this kind of just spins your mind into a bit of a frenzy, it's like this existential moment. The wind that is eroding the rock into these beautiful features actually formed the rock in the first place. So the rock, this rich red sandstone, they are all fossilized sand dunes. So I can't remember how old the Navajo sandstone is. Might be around 130 million years. But you have sand grains deposited by winds that blew across the land hundreds of millions of years ago, now being eroded by the wind of today. So it's like a tongue twister for your head to go away with. I mean, that is just mind-blowing. This is even more mind-blowing. This is incredible. So when we talk about rocks, what is the link and relationship to human stories? Here we have a stencil of a hand, of a human hand. It's one of the oldest handprints in the world. It was found in a cave in Indonesia, and it's been using the rocks. They've been able to date those handprints back to 40,000 years. 40,000 years. The rock itself is a limestone, and it dates back to about 120 million years. And when I showed you that nice mace head, and I said, isn't it incredible? The palimpsest of stories. Stories upon stories upon stories. This is the most extraordinary story, because I spoke about, have we lost that connection with rock? Where is that? Why don't we have that anymore? Because 40,000 years ago, there was an ancient person, and they ground up a rock into a powder, red ochre, and they mixed it with water, okay? And they took some into their mouth, and they thought, you know what, I'm going to make a statement here. And I'm going to put my hand on this rock, and I'm going to blow this paint over my hand. When I take my hand away, that is going to be there. I don't know how long it's going to be there, but as it turns out, it was there for 40,000 years, so we can see it today. Somebody did that with the rock. They had so much reverence for nature, for the rock, for life, their own even existence, because they thought, is this going to outlast me? It probably will. Someone will see it. And I just find that link and relationship between humans and rocks amazing. And where has that gone? Where is our connection and our link with the rock? Finally, I just want to touch on water, and this is Yellowstone National Park. Hopefully, you can see pictures of the geyser kind of shooting up water on YouTube, but it is a brilliant, brilliant example of the dynamic nature of the earth. And water leads me on to this incredible place where you live. And underneath your feet is this beautiful, pristine white rock, which is formed by water, in water. And I just find this is one of my favourite rocks, actually, because you kind of look at it and think, it's kind of powdery, it's white, it comes off in my hands, it makes my clothes really dirty. But I think it's a wonderful, beautiful rock. And this is your rock, this is your story. And it's something to be so proud of, which is why the Global Geopark matters. It matters for so many reasons, but this is a fantastic rock. I'm going to tell you a little bit more about it. So your rock here was forming 94 million years ago. This is what the Earth looked like. It was really nice. I mean, Folkestone's nice, don't get me wrong, but 94 million years ago, it was amazing. It was like the Bahamas. This is what you had here. So let's go in the time machine and go back there, because this is where it was. You've got very warm, shallow, turquoise, tropical seas. This is what Folkestone was like. Oh, we want to go back, right? What was living in those warm tropical seas? These things. Look at that. Isn't that gorgeous? I've magnified this like 100, and don't quote me on this, but it's like super magnified. But it's smaller than the width of a human hair. And it's a microfossil. It's called a coccolithopore. If I had to use another word, it's called plankton. And we see plankton in the oceans today. And here is an algal bloom. This is a NASA image, and you can see the bright turquoise bloom in the oceans. Now, during the Cretaceous period, there was so much oxygen in the atmosphere that gave rise to really enormous creatures. Something called dinosaurs that you might have heard of, maybe. Dinosaurs interesting. Coccolithopores, though, brilliant. These creatures have this skeleton made of calcium carbonate, and it is so beautiful. The plates fit together like a kind of football. At least that's how I kind of have to describe it to people when I don't have this picture. It's like this tiny little mini football made of calcium carbonate plates. When these creatures die, they sink to the bottom of the seabed. There's billions, if not trillions, of them in the oceans, the Cretaceous oceans. And as they sink to the bottom of the seabed, they kind of squish together. They kind of cement together. And as the layers and layers of these dead microorganisms get buried under layer after layer after layer, the water is squeezed out because of the weight of the layers of the rock. The coccolithopores are cemented together along with all of their detritus, and by detritus I mean poo, their waste products. Let's do that, waste products. And it forms this rock. And as I rub, sorry, someone's got to clean this up. I'm sorry, anybody has to clean all this up. I'm going to blame Folkestone on that. When I rub this rock, what I'm actually doing is I'm rubbing the dead bodies of these microorganisms. In my hand, I'm holding a mass graveyard of life, ancient life. I'm basically rubbing their dead bodies. That's what it is, right? That's your rock. It's a mass graveyard of microorganisms. Beautiful, beautiful rock, beautiful story. So why? What is the connection that you have? That is a story that is told through the Geopark proposal. It is this connection across the channel. It's a cross-channel Geopark story. And during the Ice Age, before the Ice Age, continental Europe was attached. The chalk attached us to Europe. There was a massive ridge that formed about 110 million years ago because the Alps were formed and the land was pushed up and there were lots of folds and crumples that went through the crust, and this formed a massive ridge of chalk that connected us to Europe. Now, then the Ice Age came, so I'm going to give you a really potted history, it's really quick. The Ice Age came, covered much of northern Europe in a massive ice sheet, kilometres thick. What this did was basically create, the ice sheet is in the distance here, but this chalk ridge that was formed during the formation of the Alps basically dammed a massive lake behind, this ice-dammed lake. And there were waterfalls that were coming down here off the lake, flowing over that ridge of chalk. And that's what it was like, like about 20,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago. Then something amazing happened. So that dammed lake burst through the chalk ridge. So hundreds, thousands of years of those waterfalls cascading over the ridge created kind of like pools, scour pools at the bottom of the rock. And eventually that rock got broken through by that lake. And then extraordinary to see the evidence of this on the Channel seabed. You can see the bed forms and you can see like these ancient channels of where that lake flowed over that chalk ridge and basically broke through and formed a channel, basically separating our Britain, our island from continental Europe. And this is an image taken from a Nature paper. So if you don't know what Nature is one of the most prestigious scientific journals in the world. Sanjeev Gupta, who is speaking on Sunday afternoon, published a paper that first brought this theory to light. So people have talked about it, but him and his team, his research team, looked at the evidence and definitively said the English Channel was created by this proglacial lake, breaking the Chalk Ridge Dam and flooding beyond it. And if you don't know who Professor Sanjeev Gupta is, he is the superstar of science. I mean, he's last year he did an event with Brian Cox. So Brian Cox is Brian Cox of astronomy. Sanjeev Gupta is the superstar of earth sciences. So if you haven't booked for his lecture, book, because it's very, very rare to see him speak outside of London. So I would take that opportunity. But also, he's an incredible scientist because he's been working on the Mars Perseverance mission with NASA. So you have a real superstar in your midst. I mean, yeah, I would definitely, if I could say I would see that lecture, it's going to be amazing. So you've got this amazing, I say amazing, but this breach causing this. And I'm very conscious of the time. I'm very sorry I started late. I hope you can bear with me. We have the geological sequences that we can see that connect us to Europe. So I don't want to go too much into that. So we are connected. And when you look at the geological maps for when they actually made the Channel Tunnel, you can see the line of the chalk marls. And I stood on them today. Isn't that crazy? I went to Samphire Hoe and I had goosebumps because I was standing on top of these rocks that were now at sea level. And that just blew my mind. It doesn't take much. I was like, oh, rocks from deep under the channel. And I'm standing on them at Samphire Hoe. It's just extraordinary. Look, the Channel Tunnel was basically drilled through this layer of chalk marl because it was stable enough, it was impermeable, and it was basically the best rock to make the Channel Tunnel through. That chalk connects you here in Folkestone to the continent. And that is the magical story. That is your story. And I think it is one to celebrate. And, I'm behind this amazing proposal being put forward by the team here at Kent Downs AONB. It's a cross-channel geopark, which makes it so unique and so special. And, it's just so exciting to see geology celebrated in this way. And that's it from me. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for giving up your Friday night. Thank you. Thank you so much. I'm still here, by the way. I've got time for maybe 2 or 3 questions if anybody has any, or if you, But I'm going to have to do this to see who's at. If you've got a question, just put your hand up and I'll try and listen and then repeat it back. But if you haven't got any questions, that's fine as well. We can just go home and, watch our Netflix binge series. Any questions? Does anybody have any questions? Sorry, yes, at the front.
About your book.
Oh, the book. The book is exciting. The book is also incredibly stressful. I am writing a book. It is, at the moment, the working title is The Whispers of Rock. I have a literary agent. I have a huge list of publishers, nationally and internationally, waiting to read the proposal, because bear with me, I'm at proposal stage here. The book will take about 2 years to write and research, and it should be out sometime in 2025. Thank you for asking. It is a mammoth task to research and write this amazing book. A lot of the content that you've heard today is going into the book. So you kind of got a preview, and I think you kind of liked it, right? So maybe I'm on the right track there. So thank you.
Thank you very much, Anjana. I studied geography and got into geology at university. That was my first love, and we had a brief conversation today about that. And for the rest of the evening, you can now go out from the Porterhouse and go down Clontarf Street to the Urban Room. There are 3 exhibitions on there, and then back this way to Contemporary Space. Just look for the boards that have this graphic on outside, and then into the back of Porterhouse to Block 67. We're around to ask us, and there's basically 5 exhibitions that are really looking to delve into some of the things that Anjana's been talking about today, and you can actually see some real-life original chalk that was taken from the middle of the seabed.
Oh my gosh. Stop here, my heart's racing.
Garden for the last 20 years, and she asked the guys that were doing the tunnelling if they would take some chalk for her. And so that's in the Urban Room, beautifully lit. But yeah, I invite you now. We've got cocktails in each venue to help you on your way. But and all weekend talks. We've got Sanjeev, as you said, and walks and exhibitions, and a sauna. Go onto the Folkestone Fringe website, create a Folkestone website, or pick up the program. But just to thank you so much. It's been amazing to really get through and under those sort of stories that bring it together, because we've probably all been in geography lessons or geology lessons where it sits on the page and it often stays there. So thank you very, very much.
Thank you. Thank you, and good night.